Archivist Valthani walked through corridors that had not seen light in 10,000 years. Her crystalline body casting rainbow patterns on walls older than most civilizations in the galaxy. The summons had come at midnight, carried by a messenger who refused to speak the reason aloud. And Valthani had known then that something terrible had happened. Something that required the knowledge buried in the deepest vaults beneath the Concord's capital world. She was old even by the standards of the Sithrin, a species that measured their lives in millennia rather than centuries. And in all her long existence, she had descended to the Forbiddens archives only twice before. The first time had been during the Void War, when the Concord faced extinction at the hands of a machine intelligence gone mad. And the second had been when a dying star threatened to consume 17 inhabited worlds. Both times, she had found answers in the ancient records, solutions hidden by those who came before. And both times, the galaxy had survived, because someone had been wise enough to preserve knowledge, even when that knowledge was dangerous. But this summons felt different. Heavier somehow, as if the weight of history itself pressed down upon her shoulders. The corridor ended at a door made of metal that no longer existed anywhere else in known space. A door sealed with locks that required the genetic signatures of 12 different species to open. And as the final lock disengaged with a sound like thunder, Valthani felt fear for the first time in 3,000 years. Beyond the door stood the obelisk of endings. It rose from the floor like a frozen scream. Black stone covered in symbols that predated the Concord's founding by at least 100,000 years. And at its base stood Admiral Kethrix of the Fleet Command, his four eyes wide with something that looked very much like terror. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We detected something impossible 6 hours ago, and the automated systems flagged a match with the warning frequencies encoded in this monument." Valthani moved closer to the obelisk, her crystalline fingers tracing the carved symbols she had studied for centuries but never fully understood. "What kind of match?" she asked. "A hyperspace signature," the Admiral replied. "Coming from a system on the Galactic Rim, a system that has been dead and silent for 200,000 years. Valthani's hand stopped moving. "Which system?" The Admiral's voice cracked when he answered. "Sol." The name meant nothing to most species in the Concord. Just another star among billions. But Valthani was old enough to remember the stories her grandmother had told her. Whispered tales of a species that burned too bright, that rose too fast, that asked questions no one wanted answered. She turned back to the obelisk and read the prophecy carved there. Words she had memorized long ago, but never truly believed. "When the children of fire return from their exile, the age of peace shall end. For they do not forgive, they do not forget, and they were never truly sleeping." "What does it mean?" Admiral Kethrix demanded. "What children of fire? What exile?" Valthani closed her eyes and felt the weight of 200,000 years of secrets pressing against her mind. "Have you ever wondered," she said slowly, "why the Concord has maintained peace for so long? Why 347 species spread across a galaxy of 100 billion stars have never truly gone to war with each other?" "Because of the founding accords," the Admiral replied. "Because our ancestors were wise enough to create laws that prevented conflict." "No," Valthani said. "Because our ancestors were afraid, so afraid that they did something unforgivable. Something so terrible that they swore every generation to secrecy, rather than let the truth be known." She gestured to the obelisk. "This monument was not built to warn us of an external threat, Admiral. It was built as a reminder of our own sins. A promise that one day those sins would return to haunt us. I do not understand. 200,000 years ago, there was another species in this galaxy, a young species, barely 10,000 years removed from their first tools. But they were different from any who came before. They learned faster than should have been possible. They adapted to any environment. They asked questions that made the elder races uncomfortable. Velthani paused, gathering her thoughts. They called themselves humans, and they came from a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The star we now call Sol. Admiral Ketherick shook his head. I have never heard of such a species. Of course you have not. Because the founders of the Concord erased them. Not just their civilization, not just their technology, but their very existence from the historical record. They were so thorough that only a handful of us even remember the name. Erased them. How? Why? Velthani touched the obelisk again, feeling the cold stone against her crystal skin. The humans had a philosophy that terrified the elder races. They believed that every species deserved the chance to reach the stars, that no one had the right to keep others trapped on their birth worlds. They called it freedom, and they were willing to fight for it. That does not sound so terrible. It was not terrible at all. It was beautiful. And that is precisely why it had to be destroyed. She turned to face the Admiral directly. The Concord was not built on wisdom or cooperation. Admiral, it was built on control. The elder races decided long ago who would be allowed to reach the stars and who would be kept primitive forever. The humans threatened to overturn that entire system. So the founders made them disappear. What did they do to them? They collapsed the hyperspace lanes leading to Sol, trapping the humans in their home system. Then they seeded Earth with a pathogen that destroyed their civilization and suppressed their technological development. They called it a mercy. Admiral Ketherick stood in silence for a long moment. And now something in their system is waking up. Yes, after 200,000 years. Yes. What do we do? Velthani looked at the prophecy one final time. The warning carved by ancestors who knew that their crime would one day demand payment. We prepare. Admiral, we prepare for what comes next. And we pray that 200,000 years has been enough time for humans to learn forgiveness. Because if they remember what we did to them, if they carry that memory in their hearts as we have carried our guilt and silence. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to 3 days later. The Concord's ruling council gathered in emergency session for the first time in 1,000 years. And when the eldest among them heard the news, species who remembered their grandparents' stories of the burning ones, they went pale. The humans were returning, and somewhere in the Sol system, ancient machines were powering up. Structures that had waited in patient silence for 200 millennia were coming online, and a signal was being prepared. A message that would soon echo across every frequency in known space. A message that would remind the galaxy of a truth it had tried so hard to forget. Humanity remembered, and humanity was coming home. The emergency session of the Concord Council lasted for 7 days, and by the end of it, the truth that had been buried for 200,000 years was finally dragged into the thus. Light Kithra sat in the visitors' gallery, her small frame barely visible among the massive delegates from 100 different worlds. And she listened as the eldest species confessed their ancestors' crimes. She was young by any measure, barely 40 years old, a junior diplomat from the Vethkai, a species that had only joined the Concord 12,000 years ago, long after the humans had been erased from history, and everything she had believed about the galaxy was crumbling around her. We did what was necessary, the Valmorath delegate insisted, his ancient body trembling with something that might have been shame. The humans were dangerous. They spread like fire across any world they touched. They questioned everything. They respected nothing. They would have destroyed the order we had spent millions of years building. So you destroyed them instead. Another delegate replied, her voice cold with anger. You committed genocide against an entire species because they asked uncomfortable questions. It was not genocide. The Valmorath protested. We did not kill them. We simply contained them. We gave them a chance to develop properly, slowly. The way all species should. Kethra felt sick as she listened to the justifications, the excuses, the desperate attempts to paint mass murder as an act of kindness. The records had been unsealed at the Council's demand. Ancient files that revealed the full scope of what had been done. And the truth was worse than anyone had imagined. 200,000 years ago, humanity had been a rising power in the galaxy. A species that had achieved faster than light, travel in record time, and was spreading across the stars with breathtaking speed. They had made allies among the younger races, sharing technology freely with anyone who asked, teaching species that the elder races had deemed too primitive to ever reach the stars. They had questioned the uplift prohibition, the ancient law that forbade interference with pre-spaceflight civilizations, arguing that every thinking being had the right to know they were not alone in the universe, and they had begun. To win that argument, the elder races had watched with growing horror as their carefully maintained hierarchy threatened to collapse. As species they had kept isolated for millions of years began to demand the same rights the humans offered, so they had made a decision. 12 species had formed a secret coalition. The most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, united by their fear of a single young race that refused to know its place. They had developed weapons specifically designed to target human biology. Viruses that would attack the neural pathways responsible for technological thinking while leaving basic survival instincts intact. They had built devices capable of collapsing hyperspace lanes, cutting off entire regions of the galaxy from faster-than-light travel, and on a day that was never recorded in any official history, they had struck. The hyperspace lanes leading to Sol had collapsed in an instant, trapping every human in their home system, and before the humans could understand what had happened, ships hidden in their asteroid belt had released the pathogen into Earth's atmosphere within a generation. Human civilization had fallen. Cities crumbled to dust. Technology was forgotten. And the species that had reached for the stars found themselves trapped in the mud, struggling to remember how to make fire. The elder races had called it the mercy, telling themselves that at least they had not committed true extinction, that the humans would survive in their primitive state, that perhaps in a few 100,000 years they might be ready to try again. Then, they had erased every record of humanity's existence. Every file, every image, every mention of the burning ones who had dared to dream too big. And they had sworn their descendants to eternal secrecy. The galaxy had forgotten that humans ever existed, but the humans had not forgotten. Kethra slipped out of the gallery as the council dissolved into shouting, her mind racing with everything she had learned. And she made her way to the communications center where the signal from Sol was being analyzed. "What does it say?" she asked the technician on duty, a nervous young Scytheran who looked like he had not slept in days. "Just 2 words," he replied. "Broadcast on every frequency, in every language we know, including 17 that have been dead for 100,000 years." He played the recording, and Kethra heard a voice that was somehow both ancient and young, speaking with a calmness that was more terrifying than any scream. "We remember." That was all. Just 2 words, but they contained the weight of 200 millennia of suppressed fury, of generations born and died in ignorance of their stolen heritage, of a species that had been knocked down to the Stone Age and had somehow clawed its way back to the stars. "The Council is assembling a strike fleet," the technician said quietly. "They want to finish what the Founders started. Destroy the humans before they can leave their system." Kethra stared at the screen showing the distant Sol system, the tiny yellow star that had witnessed such terrible crimes. "That will not work," she said. "Why not?" "Because if the humans have spent 200,000 years preparing for this moment, if they knew we would come eventually, then they will be ready for us. They will have had time to prepare weapons we cannot imagine, defenses we cannot breach." She turned away from the screen. "We need to talk to them, to explain, to apologize." The Council will never allow that. Then I will do it without their permission." 3 hours later, Kethra stole a diplomatic shuttle from the Concorde docks and set a course for the Galactic Rim. For a system that had been forbidden for longer than most civilizations had existed, she carried no weapons, no guards, nothing but a desperate hope that somewhere in the human heart there might still be room for forgiveness. She was wrong about that. But she was also wrong about what the humans truly wanted as her ship entered the collapsed hyperspace lanes, following a path that should have been impossible. She did not know that human sensors had already detected her approach. She did not know that they had been waiting for exactly this moment, for someone brave enough or foolish enough to come to them with open hands instead of weapons. And she did not know that the next few days would change the fate of the galaxy forever. Behind her, the Concorde fleet began its own journey toward Sol, carrying enough firepower to crack planets and shatter moons. Determined to end the human threat once and for all, the race had begun, and humanity was watching. Kethra emerged from hyperspace expecting to find ruins, the broken remnants of a civilization destroyed 200,000 years ago. Ghosts and dust and perhaps a few scattered survivors, clinging to life in the shadows of their ancestors' failure. Instead, she found a garden the Sol system blazed with light and life. Orbital rings circled Earth like silver halos. Massive stations floated in perfect formation around a partially completed sphere that surrounded the sun itself. And everywhere she looked there were ships. Thousands upon thousands of vessels moving with purpose and precision. Her shuttle sensors screamed warnings at her, detecting energy signatures and weapon systems far beyond anything the Concorde possessed. And for a long moment, Kethra simply sat in her pilot's chair and stared at the impossible. Sight before her, the humans had not merely survived, they had built an empire. A voice crackled through her communication system, speaking in perfect Concorde standard, with only the faintest trace of an accent. "Unidentified vessel. You have entered human space. Please state your name and purpose." Kethra took a deep breath and activated her transmitter. "My name is Kethra of the Vethkai. I am a diplomat of the Galactic Concorde, and I have come to talk." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, warmer this time. "You are the one who came alone. Without weapons, we have been watching your approach. Diplomat Kethra, you are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both." A soft laugh came through the speakers. "Perhaps. Very well, you will be escorted to the council station. Do not deviate from the path our ships provide, and do not be afraid. We do not harm those who come in peace." 2 sleek human vessels appeared beside her shuttle, guiding her deeper into the system, and as they traveled, Kethra saw wonders that took her breath away. She saw habitats the size of moons, home to billions of humans living in carefully maintained ecosystems. She saw shipyards producing vessels that made Concorde warships look like children's toys. She saw research stations where scientists studied technologies that should not exist for another million years, and she saw memorials everywhere she looked. There were monuments to the dead, statues and walls and gardens dedicated to those who had been lost when the Concorde struck 200,000 years ago. Reminders of a crime that humanity had never been allowed to forget. The council station orbited Earth itself, a massive ring of metal and glass that seemed to embrace the blue world below. And as Kethra's shuttle docked, she found herself greeted by a delegation of humans who looked nothing like the primitive savages the Concorde's records describe. They were tall and strong, their bodies clearly enhanced by generations of genetic engineering, but their eyes held something ancient, a weight of memory that made Kethra feel like a child in the presence of elders. The leader of the delegation stepped forward, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes that contained depths of sorrow. Kethra could barely comprehend. "Welcome to Sol." "Diplomat Kethra, my name is Elena Chan, and I speak for the human collective." "How is this possible?" Kethra asked. the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "The records say you were destroyed. Your civilization was erased," Elena smiled. "But there was no joy in it. The Concorde knocked us down. That is true. But they made a mistake. They assumed that destroying our technology would destroy our spirit. They did not understand that what makes humans dangerous is not our machines, but our refusal to give up." She gestured for Kethra to follow her into the station. "For 10,000 years after the fall, our ancestors lived as primitives, but they never stopped looking at the stars. Every generation, there were those who remembered, who passed down stories of what we had been, who searched for proof that we were not always bound to the dirt. They walked through corridors lined with historical displays, images and artifacts tracing humanity's long journey back to the stars. When we finally reached space again, we found the hyperspace lanes still collapsed. We could not leave our system. So we did the only thing we could. We stayed. We built. We prepared. Prepared for what?" Elena stopped walking and turned to face Kethra directly. "For this moment. For the day when we would finally have a chance to face those who tried to erase us." Kethra felt fear rising in her chest. "And now that the moment has come, what do you want? Revenge? War? The destruction of the Concorde?" Elena studied her for a long moment, and Kethra saw something shift in those ancient eyes. Something that might have been pain or might have been hope. 200,000 years is a long time. Diplomat, long enough for anger to burn itself out. Long enough for hatred to transform into something else. We have had time to think, time to debate, time to decide what kind of species we want to be. She turned and continued walking. Our ancestors suffered terribly, and every human alive carries that suffering in their heart. But we have chosen not to let suffering define us. We have chosen to be better than those who hurt us. They emerged onto a viewing platform that looked down at Earth, the blue and green world that had birthed humanity and witnessed their fall and rise. We do not want revenge. Kethra, we want justice. We want acknowledgement of what was done to us. We want a seat at the table we were denied, and we want the uplift prohibition abolished so that no other species is ever condemned to the isolation we endured. That is all. That is everything. It is what our ancestors died for. It is what we have spent 200 millennia preparing to demand. Kethra felt tears forming in her eyes. Tears of relief and shame and wonder. The Concorde fleet is coming. They mean to destroy you before you can leave this system. Elena nodded. We know. We have been tracking them since they launched. They will arrive in 3 days. Can you stop them? Yes, easily. We have had 200,000 years to prepare for exactly this kind of attack. Our ships are faster, our weapons more powerful, our defenses more sophisticated. We could destroy the entire Concorde fleet in less than an hour. She turned to face Kethra again, but we choose not to. We choose to offer them the same choice they never gave us. They can stand down and talk. Or they can learn why their ancestors feared us enough to try erasing us from existence. And if they refuse to stand down, then we will disable their ships without killing their crews. We will demonstrate our power without becoming the monsters they expected us to be. And we will wait for them to understand that the only path forward is peace. Kethra stared at the human leader. This woman who carried 200,000 years of pain and had somehow emerged from it with us. Compassion instead of fury. You are remarkable, she said aloud. Smile finally held a trace of warmth. We are human. We break, we heal, we remember. But we also hope, always. Even when hope seems impossible, especially then. She placed a hand on Kethra's shoulder. Will you help us? Diplomat, will you carry our message to the Concorde fleet? Will you give them the chance to choose peace? Kethra did not hesitate. Yes. Outside the viewing platform, the stars burned bright against the darkness. And somewhere among them, a fleet of warships raced toward Seoul. carrying the fears and prejudices of 200 millennia. They did not know yet that everything they believed was about to change. They did not know that the monsters they expected to find were instead going to offer them mercy, but they would learn humanity would teach them. The Concorde fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 3,000 warships bristling with weapons designed to crack planets. And Admiral Kethrix stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the impossible civilization that sprawled before him. "This cannot be real," he whispered his tactical officer. A young Cythrine named Velana checked her readings 3 times before responding. "It is real, Admiral. Long-range scans show population centers housing approximately 40 trillion humans. Their industrial capacity exceeds the Concorde's by a factor of at least 100. And their weapon systems are unlike anything in our databases." The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. How is that possible? The pathogen should have kept them primitive for another 100,000 years at least. "I do not know, Admiral, but the readings are clear. They have had 200 millennia to develop in isolation, and they appear to have used that time well." A communication signal flashed on the main screen, and Admiral Kethrix felt a chill run through his body when he saw the source. Incoming transmission from a Concorde diplomatic shuttle. "Admiral, it bears the identification codes of Junior Diplomat Kethra of the Vethkai." The young diplomat appeared on screen, her small face determined despite the fear visible in her eyes. "Admiral Kethrix, I speak to you now as a representative of the human collective. They have asked me to deliver a message. You have betrayed the Concorde." The Admiral growled. "I have tried to save it, Admiral. The humans do not want war. They do not want revenge. They only want justice. Acknowledgement of the crimes committed against them and a seat at the table they were denied. They are monsters. The records clearly state. The records were written by the monsters, Admiral. The humans were erased because they dared to believe that every species deserved freedom, because they questioned the authority of those who appointed themselves rulers of the galaxy." Admiral Kethrix turned to his tactical officer. "What are our chances if we engage?" Velana hesitated before answering. "Poor, Admiral. Their ships outnumber us 5 to 1. And each of their vessels appears to carry weapons that our shields cannot block. If we attack, we will be destroyed. Then we will die with honor." "Wait," Kethra pleaded. "Listen to their offer. At least give them a chance to prove they mean what they say." The Admiral was about to refuse when a new signal appeared on his screen. A direct communication from the human leadership. A woman with silver hair and ancient eyes looked out at him from the display. "Admiral Kethrix, my name is Elena Chun, and I speak for humanity. Your fleet has entered our space with weapons armed and hostile intent clear by any law of war. We would be justified in destroying you where you stand." The Admiral straightened his spine. "Then do so. We will not surrender to monsters. We are not asking you to surrender. Admiral, we are asking you to talk. We are asking you to hear our demands and consider them with an open mind. We are asking you to be better than your ancestors were. And if we refuse, then we will disable your ships without killing your crews. We will demonstrate our power without becoming the things you fear. And we will wait for you to understand that violence is not the only answer." Admiral Kethrix laughed. A harsh sound without humor. "You expect me to believe that after what we did to you, after 200,000 years of isolation and suffering, you would simply let us go? I expect you to believe that we have had 200,000 years to think about this moment. Admiral, 200,000 years to decide what kind of species we want to be. We chose hope over hatred, mercy over revenge, and we will not abandon that choice now, no matter how much you try to provoke us." Before the Admiral could respond, a portion of his fleet broke formation. 20 ships commanded by officers from a species that had joined the Concorde after the fall of humanity and felt no loyalty to the founders. Crimes, Admiral. We will not participate in genocide. We are standing down. The Admiral's face twisted with rage. You will be executed for treason. Then, we will die knowing we were on the right side of history. The 20 ships powered down their weapons and drifted toward the human lines, where they were met with escort vessels rather than weapons fire. Elena Chun watched this happen with something like satisfaction in her eyes. The cracks are already forming. Admiral, soon you will realize that you cannot win this war. Not with weapons and not with fear. The only question is how many of your people will die before you accept that truth. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kethrix staring at a blank screen for 3 days. The standoff continued. More ships defecting each hour as word of humanity's true history spread through the fleet. And meanwhile, Kethra shuttled between the Human Council and the Concord commanders, carrying messages of peace and pleas for understanding. On the third day, something changed. A secret communication reached Admiral Kethrix from Concord Central. A message bearing the highest security clearance, transmitted by the last 2 surviving founder species, the ones who had orchestrated humanity's fall and still feared their return above all else. Admiral, the situation has become untenable. The humans cannot be allowed to survive. If they return to the galactic community, they will expose our crimes. They will destroy everything we have built over 200 millennia. What would you have me do? Our fleet cannot defeat them. You do not need to defeat them. Admiral, you only need to delay them. We are sending a device, a weapon held in reserve for exactly this situation. It will arrive in 6 hours. What kind of device? One that will collapse their sun into a black hole. One that will destroy the entire Sol system and everything in it. One that will end the human threat forever. Admiral Kethrix felt his blood run cold. That is genocide. True genocide. Not just the suppression our ancestors practiced, but the complete extinction of an entire species. It is necessary. Admiral, the humans remember what was done to them. They will never forgive. They will never forget. And if we allow them to survive, they will eventually destroy everything we have built. The Admiral stood in silence for a long moment, looking at the human civilization spread out before him. The orbital rings and habitats and the partially completed sphere around the sun. He thought about Elena Chun's words, about mercy and hope and the choice to be better. And then he made a decision that would change the course of history. Very well, he said. I will delay them. But even as he spoke the words, he was opening a second channel, a private line to Kethra's shuttle. Diplomat, you need to warn the humans. There is a weapon coming. Something that can destroy their sun. They have 3 hours to find a way to stop it. Admiral, why are you telling me this? Because I have spent my entire life believing that the founders of the Concord were wise and just. And I have just learned that they were cowards and murderers. Because the humans offered us mercy when they could have offered us death. And I find that I want to be worthy of that mercy. He cut the transmission and turned back to his fleet. 3 hours. Humanity had 3 hours to save themselves. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, a device built to kill suns was racing toward Sol, carrying the desperate hatred of species who would rather destroy everything than face the consequences of their crimes. The final battle was about to begin. The warning spread through the human command structure in seconds, and Elena Chun stood at the center of the Council Station's war room as her people scrambled to respond to an impossible threat. A star killer, she said quietly. They actually built a star killer. General Marcus Webb, commander of the Human Defense Forces, pulled up tactical data on the main display. The device is approaching from the outer system, traveling at near light speed. Our fastest ships cannot intercept it in time. We have maybe 2 hours before it reaches the sun. Can we destroy it? Unknown. The weapon appears to be shielded against conventional attacks. and we have never encountered anything like it before. Elena closed her eyes and thought about the 200,000 years of history that had led to this moment. The countless generations of humans who had lived and died carrying the weight of their ancestors' stolen future. The dreams and hopes and struggles that had brought them to the edge of returning to the galaxy, all of it could end in 2 hours. There has to be something we can do, she said. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the chief scientist of the Human Research Council, looked up from her console with an expression that mixed fear and something that might have been hope. There is one possibility, but you are not going to like it. Tell me. The device works by creating a focused gravitational collapse, essentially compressing matter until it becomes a singularity. But that process requires energy, massive amounts of energy, more than the device can carry on its own. Where does it get the energy? From the star itself. The device will draw power from the sun's corona, using it to fuel its own destruction. But if we could intercept that energy, redirect it somehow, we might be able to prevent the collapse. General Webb shook his head. Redirect energy from a star. How would we even begin to do that? Dr. Okonkwo pointed at the display showing the partially completed Dyson swarm surrounding the sun. With that, the swarm was designed to capture and transmit solar energy. If we reconfigure it to focus that energy outward instead of inward, we could create a beam powerful enough to overload the device's systems. That would destroy the swarm, Elena said. Yes. 10,000 years of construction, gone in an instant. It would set our civilization back centuries. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the cost. Elena thought about all the work that had gone into building the swarm. The resources and labor and dreams of countless engineers and workers who had spent their lives on its construction. Then she thought about the Concorde ships still floating outside their system, the crews who had come to destroy them and had instead been offered mercy, the species throughout the galaxy who would never know that humans existed if they died here today. Do it, she said. Elena, are you certain? We have spent 200,000 years preparing to return to the galaxy, not to conquer it, not to destroy it, but to take our rightful place among the stars. If we let our enemies kill themselves trying to stop us, if we prove that we are willing to sacrifice everything to save even those who would murder us, then our return will mean something. She turned to face her council. We are not monsters. We never were, and we will not become monsters now. Even to save ourselves. The orders went out, and across the Sol system, humans began the desperate work of reconfiguring their greatest achievement. Meanwhile, Kethra watched from her shuttle as the Concorde fleet erupted into chaos. Admiral Ketherick's defection had become public, and now ships from dozens of species were turning against the Loyalists, demanding that the Star Killer be recalled. But the two founder species refused to listen, broadcasting their justifications to anyone who would hear. The humans are a threat to everything we have built. They must be destroyed. Surely you can see that. The response came not from the Concorde fleet but from the human command station. Elena Chun's voice carrying across every frequency. 200,000 years ago, your ancestors tried to erase us from existence. They failed. Now you are trying again. And you will fail again, but not because we will destroy you, because we choose to save you instead. The Concorde commanders watched in disbelief as the human Dyson swarm began to move. Thousands of massive collectors realigning themselves to face the approaching weapon. What are they doing? Dr. Okonkwo's voice joined the transmission. We are going to redirect the device's energy back into itself. The process will destroy our Dyson swarm, setting our civilization back 300 years. But it will save our sun, and it will save your fleet. You would sacrifice your greatest achievement to save. Lena's response was simple. We would sacrifice everything to prove that we are better than you think we are. The Star Killer reached the outer Corona exactly 97 minutes later. And for a terrible moment, the sun began to dim, its light flickering as the device drew power from its heart. Then the Dyson swarm activated a beam of pure energy, channeled from 10,000 massive collectors, struck the device with the force of a small star. And the gravitational collapse that was meant to kill the sun was turned back on itself. The explosion was visible from every world in the system, a flash of light brighter than anything the galaxy had seen in millennia, and when it faded, the sun still burned. Wounded but alive, the Dyson swarm was gone, vaporized in an instant. 10,000 years of work reduced to scattered atoms, but humanity survived in the aftermath. The Concorde fleet surrendered without a fight, their commanders too stunned by what they had witnessed to continue their mission. And the two founder species who had ordered the attack found themselves abandoned by every ally they had ever had. The truth spread across the galaxy in days. The full story of what had been done to humanity and how they had responded. And species after species withdrew from the Concorde in disgust. 1 month later, a new council was formed, one that included a human representative for the first time in 200,000 years. Lena Chen took her seat among the delegates of 300 civilizations. And when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of all the generations who had dreamed of this moment. We do not come seeking revenge. We come seeking justice. We ask only that the truth be taught, that no species ever again be condemned to isolation, and that we be given the chance to build something better together. The uplift prohibition was abolished that same day, and across the galaxy, species that had been kept primitive for millions of years finally received the gift that humanity had tried to give them so long ago. Knowledge that they were not alone. 6 months later, Cathra stood in a memorial garden on Earth, surrounded by walls carved with billions of names. Every human who had died in the original fall, and every generation that had been born and died in isolation. Afterward, beside her stood an elderly Velmorith, one of the survivors of the founder species, weeping openly as he contemplated the magnitude of his people's crimes. A human child approached them, a little girl no more than 7 years old, and she looked up at the alien with curious eyes. "Why are you crying?" she asked. "Because my ancestors did something terrible, and I do not know how to make it right." The child thought about this for a moment, then reached up and took the Velmorith's hand in her own. "My teacher says that we remember so we do not repeat, but she also says that we forgive so we can move forward. Maybe you can help us remember, and we can help you move forward." The alien looked down at this small human, this child of the species his people had tried to erase, and he saw in her eyes the same hope that Elena Chun had shown him, the same mercy that had saved his fleet from destruction. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you forgive something so terrible?" The child smiled. "We do not do it alone. We do it together." Cathra watched this moment, this small connection between two species separated by 200 millennia of pain and silence, and she felt something shift in her heart. She had come to Seoul expecting to find monsters, the terrible threat that the prophecy had warned about, the children of fire who would burn the galaxy in their rage. Instead, she had found teachers, healers, a species that had been given every reason to destroy and had chosen to build. Instead, in her final report to the new Concorde Council, she wrote words that would be remembered for generations. "We asked ourselves for 200,000 years what made humanity dangerous. We thought it was their weapons, their numbers, their adaptability. We were wrong. What makes humanity dangerous is that when they had every right to become monsters, they chose to become something better. They could have burned the galaxy. Instead, they lit a candle and invited us to share the light. The stars shone bright over Earth, and for the first time in 200,000 years, humanity was truly home, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as family. The return was complete.